Remember a couple weeks ago when they said that Adam Silver had until Halloween to sit in front of the commission and pretty much talk about this whole gambling and NBA situation. Well, I'm here to tell you, Adam Silver's running out of time, and he has until tomorrow to speak with the officials that run the country. Because if not, he's more than likely.
Okay, this is wild. The WNBA is about to get slammed with major federal trouble. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has until tomorrow, yes, tomorrow, to appear before Congress and answer some serious questions about gambling scandals and game rigging in the NBA. And guess what? The WNBA is getting dragged right into this mess too. Federal investigators are now looking into referees, huge betting schemes, and even potential organized crime connections. Think about it. Caitlin Clark spent an entire season getting absolutely assaulted on the court while refs just looked the other way. And now people are seriously wondering if that was all intentional. This isn't just a sports story anymore. This is going federal. Before we dive deeper, hit that comment section below. How many of those mind-bogglingly bad calls against Caitlin Clark suddenly make way more sense if those refs were actually betting on the game?
Federal indictments were announced involving current player Terry Rozier and current head coach Chauncey Billups. What was your initial reaction, and what have the last 36 hours been like for you?
My initial reaction was I was deeply disturbed. There's nothing more important to the league and its fans than the integrity of the competition. And so I had a pit in my stomach. It was very...
Let's be super clear about what's actually unfolding here, because this is way bigger than most people realize. The Senate Commerce Committee, spearheaded by Senator Ted Cruz, just sent a blistering letter to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver demanding answers about gambling controversies and, get this, alleged game rigging. Silver has until Monday, which if you're watching this now, is literally tomorrow, to respond directly to Congress. We're not talking about a PR statement for the media here. This is responding to actual federal investigators who have the power to subpoena people, launch full investigations, and even bring criminal charges. This isn't just some sports drama that'll be forgotten in a week. This is Capitol Hill stepping in, and that means things have escalated far beyond what the NBA can sweep under the rug internally.
We know we got civil rights situations going on. We got illegal gambling going on, and supposedly, allegedly, referees rigging the games. Cathy Engelbert talking about the players. It is just an ugly situation going on in the media when it comes to the sport of basketball.
What's even more shocking is what's in that letter from the Senate Commerce Committee. It specifically demands documentation of any investigations the NBA has conducted since 2020 into players, coaches, or employees related to betting or, wait for it, game rigging. Yes, game rigging. That precise phrase is right there in official congressional correspondence, not questionable officiating, not controversial calls, but game rigging. The implication couldn't be clearer. Congress has serious reasons to believe games are being fixed, and they want to know what the NBA knew, when they knew it, and exactly what they did about it. And if the answer comes back, we knew and we did nothing, well, that's gonna unleash catastrophic legal problems for Adam Silver and the entire league. Now here's where things get really interesting for WNBA fans, especially anyone who watched Caitlin Clark's first season closely. The WNBA and NBA are essentially run by the same organization. They share ownership structures, they coordinate on initiatives, and most critically, they often use many of the same referees, or at least operate under identical officiating standards. So when Congress starts investigating the NBA for game rigging and gambling issues, the WNBA doesn't get to just sit on the sidelines pretending they're separate. They are absolutely going down together if this investigation uncovers what it's looking for. Let's talk about what everyone is thinking, but most mainstream media won't say directly the officiating in Caitlin Clark's games was suspiciously terrible in ways that consistently benefited betting lines. She was physically assaulted on court repeatedly with 0 calls. Phantom fouls were called against her in crucial moments. Opponents got away with flagrant violations while she got penalized for practically breathing on defenders. And all of this unfolded in the most watched WNBA games in history, which also means they were the most heavily bet on WNBA games ever. That massive overlap between objectively terrible officiating and huge betting interest is something federal investigators are absolutely not going to ignore. The NBA is now under federal scrutiny, and all eyes are on Commissioner Adam Silver. Here's what's confirmed. No fluff, just facts. The U.S. Congress has officially requested a briefing from Adam Silver by October 31st, citing concerns about a potential gambling and game-fixing scandal involving individuals tied to the league. This bipartisan request comes from the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, which wants clarity on the integrity of the game after reports that insiders may have used non-public information for betting. This isn't the first time sports leagues have faced gambling scrutiny, but Congress stepping in raises the stakes to a national level. The NBA has only confirmed it plans to fully cooperate, but what's still unclear is how deep this investigation will go and whether it might fundamentally shake how professional sports handle transparency and betting partnerships. So, the big question is, will this congressional briefing expose widespread corruption or just reinforce that the league is playing by the rules? What triggered this whole federal inquiry was a specific case involving multiple people, including Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, where federal authorities arrested over 24 individuals connected to sharing non-public information with sports bettors and rigging poker games. When federal investigators start pulling on threads related to sports gambling, they don't stop at one league or one sport. They follow the money and connections wherever they lead. And if those connections lead directly to WNBA referees who made questionable calls in high-profile games featuring the league's biggest star, that's a monumental problem for WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. Her position, frankly, is incredibly precarious right now. She's already facing an ongoing civil rights investigation into how the league handled the physical targeting of Caitlin Clark. Now she's potentially staring down a federal gambling and game rigging investigation. The civil rights angle focuses on whether the league failed to protect Caitlin from discriminatory treatment, while the gambling angle would investigate whether games were being fixed by referees with betting interest. Both investigations could find that Engelbert either knew about these problems and did nothing, or should have known and failed to investigate. Neither option looks good. Let's revisit some specific moments from Caitlin's first season with the chilling context of potential game rigging in mind. The playoff game against the Aces, where Aaliyah Boston fouled out in record time on undeniably questionable calls, the countless non-calls when Caitlin was hit, put, or undercut, the technical fouls called on her for reactions that other players routinely got away with, and the flagrant foul by Kennedy Carter that wasn't even reviewed initially. At the time, we explained these as incompetence, bias, or just refs welcoming the rookie. But what if it was something far more calculated? What if certain outcomes were being engineered for betting purposes? The timing of this investigation is also highly significant, covering activities since 2020, which includes Caitlin's entire WNBA career. If investigators are looking at betting patterns and officiating decisions, Caitlin's games are going to be under an intense microscope because they had the highest viewership and almost certainly the highest betting volume of any WNBA games in history. When you combine massive betting interests with objectively terrible officiating, federal investigators get very interested, asking questions like who benefited financially from these specific calls and did any officials have betting connection. The congressional letter also asks the NBA to explain their communications with legalized sportsbooks, which is crucial because the leagues have lucrative partnerships with betting companies. These partnerships generate huge revenue but create glaring potential conflicts of interest. If league officials or referees have any financial connections to betting outcomes, either directly through personal bets or indirectly through partnership arrangements, that's an enormous problem. And since the WNBA operates under the same umbrella as the NBA and has similar betting partnerships, they're going to face the exact same scrutiny. One particularly damning detail from the congressional letter is the request for information about connections to organized crime. The investigation into John T. Porter allegedly uncovered connections to multiple crime families, and when organized crime gets involved in sports betting and game fixing, the scope of the problem tends to be far larger than initially suspected. Federal investigators don't ask about organized crime connections unless they have specific unsettling reasons to believe those connections exist, and that should absolutely terrify everyone in professional basketball right now. Even A'ja Wilson's special whistle that fans have joked about for years suddenly looks a lot more suspicious in this context. A star player for the league's most successful team getting favorable calls isn't unusual in sports, but when those favorable calls directly impact betting outcomes in games with massive wagering volume, investigators start asking extremely uncomfortable questions. Would refs give Wilson preferential treatment because she's a star, or because that treatment served other purposes related to point spreads and betting lines? The answer to that question could have criminal implication. The fact that this is all happening under the current administration is also significant. The previous administration was focused on other priorities, and sports gambling issues weren't high on the agenda. However, the current administration has shown a clear willingness to investigate and aggressively prosecute corruption in sports, entertainment, and business. Adam Silver and Cathy Engelbert are likely realizing that any political protection they might have had previously is gone, and they're now dealing with investigators who genuinely don't care about maintaining good relationships with professional sports leagues. The recent charges against Cleveland Guardians pitchers for conspiracy and bribery over throwing balls and strikes demonstrate just how seriously federal authorities are taking sports gambling corruption right now. This investigation is expanding rapidly, potentially encompassing baseball, basketball, and other sports. The NBA and WNBA being connected to a broader pattern of systemic sports gambling corruption makes their individual situations worse, not better. They can't dismiss this as an isolated incident or a few bad actors. This is being treated as systemic, and investigators are treating it that way. Let's address the elephant in the room. If federal investigators find evidence that WNBA games were being fixed, and that this fixing specifically targeted games involving Caitlin Clark, the biggest star and draw in the league, the fallout will be catastrophic. We're talking about criminal charges for referees and potentially league officials. We're talking about civil lawsuits from bettors who lost money on fixed games. We're talking about the complete destruction of the WNBA's credibility at the exact moment when the league was finally gaining mainstream attention and legitimacy. The irony is absolutely brutal. Cathy Engelbert's response to this situation will define her tenure as WNBA commissioner. She can cooperate fully with investigators, turn over all documentation, and demonstrate that the league takes these allegations seriously, or she can try to minimize, deflect, and protect the league's image at the expense of transparency. The first option might reveal uncomfortable truths, but preserve some credibility long term. The second option might work temporarily, but will be devastating if investigators find evidence of wrongdoing that the league tried to hide. The meeting between NBA officials and House Energy and Commerce Committee staffers that was described as productive is interesting because it suggests the league is at least trying to cooperate. But productive conversation is political speak that tells us absolutely nothing about what was actually discussed or what evidence was presented. The fact that the investigation is continuing despite this meeting suggests that whatever the NBA provided wasn't sufficient to satisfy congressional concerns. For Caitlin Clark specifically, this investigation has personal implications beyond just being a player affected by bad officiating. If games involving her were being fixed, she was essentially being used as a pawn in a massive gambling scheme without her knowledge or consent. That's not just bad for the league, it's potentially actionable legally. She could have claims against the league, against referees, against anyone who profited from fixing games she played in. The legal exposure here is massive. The special whistle phenomenon that fans have documented throughout the season is exactly the kind of pattern that federal investigators look for in gambling corruption cases. If specific players consistently receive favorable or unfavorable treatment from officials across multiple games and multiple referee crews, that strongly suggests coordination, and coordination in officiating outcomes is literally the definition of game fixing. Whether that fixing was motivated by bias, incompetence, or pure gambling interests is what investigators need to determine, but the pattern itself is undeniable. The broader implications for sports betting in America are also significant. The country just spent years legalizing and regulating sports gambling after decades of prohibition. The justification was that legal regulated betting would be safer and more transparent than illegal betting. If this investigation reveals that legal sportsbooks were partnering with leagues that were fixing games, that completely undermines the entire regulatory framework. Congress might reconsider legalization, impose new restrictions, and the entire sports betting industry could face a major reckoning. Adam Silver's reputation as a progressive, player-friendly commissioner is going to take a massive hit if this investigation finds evidence of gambling corruption that happened on his watch. He's been commissioner since 2014, which covers the entire period the congressional letter is asking about. He simply can't claim ignorance of systemic problems that occurred over a decade of his leadership. Either he knew and failed to act, or he failed to create systems that would detect and prevent gambling corruption, and neither option reflects well on his leadership. The deadline being tomorrow creates an urgency that's probably intentional on Congress's part. They're not giving Silver time to craft perfect PR responses or coordinate with lawyers to minimize exposure. They want answers now, which suggests they already have evidence and they're testing whether Silver will be honest about what the league knows. If his response tomorrow contradicts evidence Congress already possesses, that's when things get really serious legally. For WNBA fans who have been documenting terrible officiating all season, this investigation potentially validates everything they've been saying. The terrible calls weren't just incompetence, and the targeting of Caitlyn wasn't just biased. There might have been actual criminal activity happening that affected game outcome. That doesn't make it better, obviously, but it does mean that complaints about officiating were legitimate concerns about the integrity of the sport, rather than just fans being salty about losses. So, Adam Silver faces a Monday deadline to answer Congress about gambling and game rigging, and the WNBA is about to get dragged into this federal investigation right alongside the NBA. If this gave you a new perspective on those terrible Caitlin Clark calls, hit that like button and subscribe. Comment below how many WNBA refs are sweating right now, knowing federal investigators might review their game footage.